Debi Cornwall tells the truth about fiction by not separating one from the other, questioning and documenting the surreal and the suspicious in a post-September 11th reality. She is a photographer turned civil rights lawyer turned conceptual artist, returning to her roots after a 12-year career defending the wrongly accused and convicted. Her first book, Welcome to Camp America, Inside Guantánamo Bay, was named one of the 10 best of the year by the New York Times Magazine. Please welcome Debi Cornwall.
Good morning. I've been asked to talk to you this morning about a new project I'm working on. It's very much still in process, and you're the first people to hear about it. So I'd like to start by setting a scene in a place called Pineland. A police officer on traffic patrol sees a suspicious vehicle. He decides to pull it over. He inquires of its occupants, driver, a passenger in the front, and someone in the back of a truck who appears to be pretending to be asleep. Their answers don't add up. So he asks them to get out of the vehicle and for permission to search a bag. Things escalate. There is a struggle, and the police officer shoots 2 men. I shot the darker one first, he testifies later. 1 man dies. The police officer finds out only after the fact that the men in the truck were actually special forces operatives engaging in an immersive real-world training scenario to infiltrate the fictional country of Pineland, mapped out across southern rural counties. They thought the police officer was playing a role in their war game. I plan to retell this story on film with moving images, using testimony from the survivors as my script. Though I can't share that with you quite yet, I'm telling this story because it encapsulates so many of the questions that I'm grappling with in this new project. The United States has been at war without pause for over 18 years, since soon after the September 11th, 2001 attacks and the ensuing war in Afghanistan. And during that time, truth and fiction have been increasingly blurred in American life. I should reiterate here that for many years I practiced as a civil rights lawyer, and we'll come back to that in a moment. First, I was recently reminded of a very candid quote by Karl Rove, the chief political strategist for President George W. Bush. And speaking to New York Times Magazine reporters in 2004, he said, quote, "We're an empire now, and when we act, we create reality. We're history's actors, and you, all of you, will be left to just study what we do," end quote. Setting up on one hand those who act on behalf of the state, those who create reality, and on the other hand, the rest of us, those who are acted upon, we who perceive, we who absorb, we who parse government messaging. So in my capacity as a lawyer, my job was to gather evidence and prove and expose the truth. As a visual artist, though my practice is a little different, I'm more interested in asking questions and inviting conversation about those questions than I am in answering them. So how did I get here? Taking you back to 2014, I began my first post-lawyering project, Welcome to Camp America, where I documented America's so-called war on terror prisons established to house so-called enemy combatants at the US Naval Station in Guantánamo Bay, Cuba, following the war in Afghanistan's start. Gitmo, as it's known, is a place where the US military controls access, who can go and what they see. So media are escorted at all times when carrying cameras, and every image is reviewed daily in operational security review. So whatever is deemed to violate any of the 12 pages of rules you've signed as a condition of going there gets deleted with no trace. Most importantly, for me as a photographer, no faces were allowed to be photographed. Under these very strict regulations, one kind of picture has come to represent Guantanamo in our public imagination. I don't even need to show you that picture. If I ask you to envision Guantanamo in your mind's eye, I'm guessing most of us will have some version of the same picture, right? Does it involve a prisoner in an orange jumpsuit, barbed wire, and a patrolling soldier in fatigues? With repetition, meaning is drained. We don't look, we don't really see anymore what's happening. I wanted to take a different kind of picture, something that would invite a fresh look. Turns out there's a gift shop in Guantánamo Bay, where you can buy stuffed animals like this plush turkey vulture, a local bird, for $11.99, or at Radio Gitmo, a Fidel bobblehead for $20, rockin' in Fidel's backyard, it advertises. Or if you've got kids at home, this tot-sized tea could be yours for $7.99. What could be more American? I wanted to understand the human experience in a place where no one has chosen to live. My initial instinct was to cross-examine my way into access, but I discovered almost immediately that that would get me nowhere. But something else happened. During the first of 3 trips, my military escort said to me, "Gitmo is the best posting a soldier could have. There's so much fun to be had here." That surprised me. And I thought it might surprise others. So rather than fighting a losing battle to visualize what was happening behind closed doors, instead I just looked at what I was being shown. I photographed the fun, the home and play spaces of the military, like this kiddie pool on the windward side. And then I juxtaposed those spaces with equivalent spaces for inmates, like this compliant detainee media room in Camp 5, the solitary confinement unit. I photographed a soldier lounging on Windmill Beach, just down the hill from the detention center complex up to the left that I was not allowed to photograph from the outside, and a prayer rug with an arrow to Mecca in Camp Echo just up that hill. I then went on to photograph 14 men cleared and released from Guantanamo in 9 countries. I photographed each of them as though they were still held and subject to the military's no faces rule. I photographed men like Jamel, a Berber returned home to Algeria after being held in Guantanamo without charge or trial for 11 years, 11 months, and 18 days. Men like Hussein, a Yemeni transferred to Slovakia after being held without charge or trial for 12 years, 6 months, and 11 days. I completed the book for Welcome to Camp America during the course of the 2015-2016 US presidential campaign. It was a period in which the phrase fake news entered our vocabulary. It seemed suddenly that Americans could no longer agree on the most basic of facts, and the stakes were rising. Given my experience at Guantanamo, where one version of reality was presented and on show, I became curious to look more closely at the staging and performance of American power. For necessary fictions, I'm asking, given perpetual war abroad, constant vigilance, and political division at home, what are the games we play? What are the stories we tell to manage unsettling realities? I decided to look at the forever wars, these post-September 11th conflicts that began in Afghanistan in October of 2001 and now extend to anti-terror operations in more than 80 countries. I wanted to look at the devastation wrought by war. I wanted to understand its human toll, both abroad and also at home. And I wanted to look at the stories told about these wars by those planning them, by those waging them, and for those whose lives and relationships and communities will be forever marked by them. For the last 3 years,
the enemy is disguised among you now.
Stop.
They don't wear uniforms anymore.
Can we go back one, please? Thank
So
you.
we're trying to do everything we can to ensure your safety.
Are we able to go back? Thank you. Perfect. For the last 3 years, I've photographed in a place that has not received many headlines. I've photographed battles and hearts and minds operations in a place called Atropia.
The enemy is disguised among you now. They don't wear uniforms anymore. So we're trying to do everything we can to ensure your safety.
If we know who's the enemy and who's these bad people, if we recognize them, we will be the first people to tell them. 30 minutes ago, we just came in here and then we reported people
And we're very
in
thankful
the
for that.
location. We gave them everything, all the information that they needed.
So I've traveled quite extensively over the last 3 years to photograph these operations in Atropia, but I never left the United States. Atropia, like Pineland, is a fictional country. Atropia exists on military bases across the United States, and I've photographed on 10 of these sites. I photographed the mock Afghan and Iraqi villages constructed on military sites to host immersive, realistic military war games. I photographed these stage sets, like the mosques or creatively intra-denominational houses of worship. These landscapes are constructed to evoke a physical fidelity, to be realistic enough to give the training forces a sense of what it might be like when they arrive abroad. They are realistic enough, but when you get a little closer, there are these slippages. Things are not always what they seem. I also photographed the players. These are civilian Afghans and Iraqis, many of whom have fled war only to recreate it in costume in the service of the US military. These naturalized Americans may be playing out alternative versions of their past selves as village elders or shopkeepers. Some of them are asked to play insurgents or even suicide bombers. Others, by necessity, are cast in the role of casualties of war. Amputees receive extra dispensation as role players. I also photographed the training forces, real American Marine soldiers and National Guards men and women who are preparing to deploy. Again, the scenarios, too, though fictional, are designed to be as realistic as possible. The idea is to present them with the sights and the sounds and even sometimes the smells of foreign sights and of battle, which through repetition can create a sense of muscle memory and perhaps, the thinking goes, inoculate against the trauma of war. It can get quite loud, so this is a word of warning to those who may be sensitive about this next clip. So whereas the civilian role players are enacting alternative versions of their pasts, the training forces are enacting their possible futures as injured soldiers, as casualties. Hollywood makeup artists are flown in to paint them in what's called moulage, these fake injuries. From the first Gulf War in 1991 into 2009, the American press was banned from publishing photographs of flag-draped coffins. It was considered disrespectful or too hard to look at. What do you see when you look at these photographs of injured American soldiers? Is it easier to look at them knowing that the injuries are painted on, or not? Does it create some kind of feeling in the pit of your stomach? A visceral reaction can be the start of a conversation. I only have a few minutes with each of the men and women I photograph for this moulage series, and I ask each of them the very same question. How does it feel to be made up this way, knowing you're about to get on an airplane and deploy abroad? For some, it's a joke. It makes them laugh. Others prefer to enact how it might feel one day if they were actually to be injured by shrapnel or gunfire. Others have a harder time answering. I spoke to one young man who took several minutes as I continued to make his picture. Finally, he said, "I just got married." In this militarized post-September 11th era, how are fictions deployed and how are they embraced? To what end? What is gained and what is lost? The last piece of this new work is an experimental short film about an incident in 2015 in which entire communities mistook war games for the real thing. It's a 16-minute long piece, but I'll show you a glimpse.
There are two words we're about to say that some of you will know immediately and probably won't like. Jade Helm.
Operation Jade Helm. It is called Jade Helm.
Jade Helm, a large-scale military exercise that sparked widespread fear.
The conspiracy theories are running wild.
A foreign invasion, martial law.
Hashtag Jade Helm. I mean, there's days with thousands of tweets.
Officials insist most of that fear is irrational.
But what's really happening?
And we just want to hone our skills.
When we have a federal government that cannot tell the truth, how do we know that what you're saying is true?
A growing distrust of the government from people who are usually waving the flag.
I can tell you right now, this is not a drill.
We don't come in, we don't take over. We want the community to accept us.
That's what they would say, wouldn't they?
They're trying to come to our houses and kill us.
That it is a preparation for martial law. That's because it is not a preparation for martial law. So that's what you say.
It's right. Is our federal government coming in and going to practice imposing martial law on Texas?
Some are calling it a Texas takeover.
The country is a ticking time bomb. A time bomb.
3 men charged, accused of stockpiling guns, grenades, and even bombs, the operation that investigators say motivated them to be ready to fight the government.
The criminal complaints give us a window into why the FBI says the 3 men are facing conspiracy charges. It's a troubling and bizarre plan they're accused of crafting, possibly related to other conspiracy theories about a military takeover in Texas.
Jade Helm 15 might be just training exercises, but there's no doubt it started some kind of war, and this time it's between America and itself.
So in 2015, realistic war games became fake news that inspired real fear and real consequences. How does this happen? For necessary fictions, I'm using war games really as a prompt to grapple with larger questions that don't necessarily have to do with war games or war at all. How do state-created realities operate? How do they affect us? And I'm inviting each of you to grapple along with me in thinking about what happens when our institutions fail to help us discern fantasy from reality, truth from fiction. Perhaps by looking directly at the fictions and asking questions, we might come up with some different answers. Thank you.